This episode is brought to you by Thorn, and I have some incredible news for any of you that are in the military, first responder, or medical professions. In an effort to give back, Thorn is now offering you an ongoing 25% off each and every one of your purchases of their incredible nutritional solutions. Now, Thorn is the official supplement of CrossFit, the UFC, the Mayo Clinic, the Human Performance Project, and multiple special operations organizations. I myself have used them for several years, and that is why I brought them on as a sponsor. Some of my favorite products they have are their Multivitamin Elite, their Whey Protein, the Super EPA, and then most recently, Cinequil. As a firefighter, a stuntman, and a martial artist, I've had my share of brain trauma and sleep deprivation, and Cinequil is their latest brain health supplement. Now, to qualify for the 35% off, go to thorn.com, thorne.com. Click on sign in and then create a new account. You will see the opportunity to register as a first responder or member of military. When you click on that, it will take you through verification with GovX. You'll simply choose a profession, provide one piece of documentation, and then you are verified for life. From that point onwards, you will continue to receive 35% off through Thorn. Now, for those of you who don't qualify, there is still the 10% off using the code BTS10, Behind the Shield 10, for a one-time purchase. Now, to learn more about Thorn, go to episode 323 of the Behind the Shield podcast with Joel Totoro and Wes Barnett. Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name is James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome on the show former fire chief turned deputy city manager of Plano, Texas, Sam Greif. Now, for those of you who have been following this for any amount of time, you will know I am extremely passionate about making a healthy firefighter work week. And Plano, Texas, just last week announced that they are going to be the first in the state of Texas to transition to the 24/72 schedule. Now, on my website, you will find a link that says 24/72, and it is full of episodes that pertain to this. But this is the first time we've had someone who's now in the city manager position talking about the transition. So we discuss a host of topics, from Sam's own journey into the fire service, identifying the issues with firefighter mental and physical health, opposing the 4896, how that led him to the conversation of the 24/72, the importance of humility and communication by all involved to make this happen for their fire department, the potential fiscal savings, how they are going to transition over the next 4 years, and so much more. Now, before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of well over 1,100 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I welcome onto the show Sam Greif. Enjoy. Well, Sam, I want to start by saying thank you so much for being so generous with your time and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Well, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
So where on planet Earth are we finding you this afternoon?
Plano, Texas.
Brilliant. For people listening, they'll probably recognize that city for good reasons, I hope. So let's start at the very beginning of your timeline then. Tell me where you were born and tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, what your parents did, how many siblings.
Okay, real quick. Born in 1963, Fort Worth, Texas. My father was Dr. Lawrence B. Greif. He was a surgeon, general surgeon, and family practitioner later in his career. Mom was in the medical profession as well, in nursing. I had two older sisters, unfortunately, both of them have preceded me in death. My latest one just back in August. My oldest one, I lost the other one 2 years ago, September this month, as a matter of fact. So I'm only child now, but I've got one son who is a veteran of the Fort Worth Fire Department, 18-year veteran. He's a lieutenant. That's where I did my first 30 years of fire and EMS, was in the Fort Worth Fire Department. Well, I started on the Fort Worth ambulance service when I was just shy of 19 years old, and then became a paramedic a year later, and then a few years after that finally landed on the fire department. But did for 30 years there, retired as the assistant chief of ops, came to Plano, Texas to be the fire chief in summer of 2015, and did that for about 6.5 years. And then my boss is the city manager. He was in the chair I'm in now for many years, and loved working for him. He's just a super great man in so many levels, and he and I just kind of click. And so I had an opportunity to come into this position as the DCM over public safety, and I've been doing that now for coming up on 4 years in November. So, and in full disclosure, I've already announced my retirement a couple of months ago, that I'll be leaving at the end of January of 26. So I'm hanging it up after what will be 44 years of service. It's time to go spend some time with my son and my grandbabies. I got 2 little granddaughters, and so spend some time with my wife and give back to my family, because they've given a lot of their time for me to pursue my career.
Well, I'm sure we're going to unpack some of that as we get in this conversation. Firstly, I'm sorry to hear about your siblings. That's horrendous that you had to deal with that. Going back, though, to when the 3 of you were kids, talk to me about the pros and the cons of your parents being in the medical fields that they were in.
Well, Pop, I was an oops baby. My dad was 42, I think, when I was born. So he had been a World War II veteran. He was born in 1922 and went off to war when he was 20 years old. And coming up, the greatest generation, no question about it, but he was a very tough man. And even though he was a doctor, it was kind of like when you got hurt on the playground or something, you came in, it was like, does this hurt? And so he was, rub some dirt on it, son. So I would say that would be the negative side, is that he was just a tough guy. And so you weren't going to get a whole lot of sympathy. But if you did get a cold or you did get sick, the upside is you had great medical care, Johnny, on the spot. But I think long hours, dedication. My dad became a doctor back in the days when the doctor that did everything. He delivered your baby, he took out your appendix, what have you. And so making the rounds with him as a little boy in the evenings, sometimes he would take me to the hospital, and, you sat in the waiting room while he went and checked on patients. And you see that dedication, because that was after he'd worked all day in the office, came home, had dinner, and then he had to go back and do make rounds. And so, just long hours and the dedication to helping others, I think that's one of the takeaways that I had growing up in that environment.
When we talk about the World War II generation, and we say the greatest generation, the number of people now that I've heard stories, whether it was father or grandfather, you realize that even though they did, as a generation, come back, roll up their sleeves and get to work, that doesn't mean that the things that happened, the things that they saw, the things that they had to do didn't take a toll. And in a way, we almost took away their ability to talk about it by saying, no, shh, you're the greatest generation. You just got back to work. And you hear a lot of issues about, domestic violence and alcoholism, and a lot of these struggles that these veterans had from that era that really never had the space to process it. When you reflect back now with this different lens that you have, what were the impacts, if any, of the war on your father?
It's funny you should say that. You can't see it, but hanging on the wall here is a plaque of all my dad's medals, shadow box. My dad, all he talked about is that, we went off to war and came home and you try to ask him questions about it, and he deflected. So that told me there was something there. Actually, after I became the fire chief here, I got curious. My pop passed away of heart disease back in 1994. He was 72. I wanted to know more about his history, so I wrote the Department of Defense, and you can actually go through a process, send a certified letter, and you can get the war records. And so I did all of that, and when I got the records back, it brought tears to my eyes, because I had no idea what all he had saw. But, he did both of his years of of active duty from 1942 to 44 was in the South Pacific, specifically in the Battle of New Guinea. And he earned a slew of medals. He never talked about that, never saw those medals. There's actually an organization that will send you those medals, once the records have been revealed. And so it's something I have hanging in my office as a tribute to my dad. But I want to brag about it, but Dad never talked about it. But I'm sure he saw some horrific things that probably hardened him. And I don't, it's not like PTSD was invented in my and your generation. Well, I'm 20 years ahead of you. But, it didn't get invented it didn't start after us. We've learned how to have those conversations. And I think back in their days, that was a sign of weakness to have those conversations, quite frankly. So they bottled up a lot of stuff.
When you listen to, whether it's poetry or read stories when it comes to war going back centuries, you hear the same phrase, soldier's heart, 1,000-yard stare, shell shock. These are all the same things that we're talking about now. And I think, there is a balance. You hear the term quiet professional, and there's a certain point where, a police officer, firefighter, special operations soldier doesn't want to talk about some of the things that they do, or in the military case, maybe can't talk about it. But there's a fine line between never talking about it and not always talking about it. And I think in our profession, it's the same. There was this facade that we just suck it up and get on with it. But sadly, we realized through the Florian crests that have had the black band in them that just litter our social media fields now, for example, that if you do that, it does come at a consequence.
Yes. And like I said, our generation, we encourage it. We want people to talk. We want to have after action. You want big horrific events, but when you compartmentalize, I don't care what anybody says. I mean, I think back and I wonder, did my dad's heart disease, was it a reflection of maybe what he saw and how he bottled up emotions and stuff? I mean, it's speculation at this point, but he was awful young. He was 51 when he had his first heart attack, and they didn't think he was going to live through the night. I was just a little boy. I was 10 or so at the time. And he wound up living another, 21, 22 years. I credit my stepmom with that because she made him take breaks and made him eat right and that kind of stuff. But, I wonder what impact did that have on him and not being able to have those conversations. I just think we do a hard job. It's a hard job. It's done by hard people making hard decisions quickly. And, I'd be lying if I said it hadn't taken a toll on me. But, I guess I learned at an early age, if you can see human tragedy and not be moved by it, if you can have a call that involves, especially children, I think all of us universally agree, those are always the hardest. And if that don't make you want to come home and hug your kid tight, if you can't cry, there's something wrong with you, quite frankly. You can't unsee what our eyes have seen. That's what I always tell people. And, it's every day is not Chicago fire. It's not grueling. We both know that. But it only takes one or two bad days a year to really imprint in your mind some things that are tough to deal with. And I just encourage my guys, you have to talk about it, find an outlet. And I don't mean alcohol. But find something to de-stress.
Well, you talk about the physical manifestations too. I mean, we know that there's a direct correlation between stress and also sleep deprivation and all things physical ill health and all things mental ill health. So is it the only thing? No, but it's an amplifier. I mean, we rest and recover so that we can perform at the highest level. And if we have physicians or firefighters or paramedics or police officers working themselves into the ground, there is going to come a cost, and it might be a mental break first, or it might be a physical break.
Yeah. We've had this conversation, but you think about all the critical professions that have much less hours that you're allowed to stay in the saddle. Aircraft pilots, the flight attendants, They're there for your safety, as we always hear on those announcements, and they truly are. I mean, it's not a belittlement of the position at all. They're there to help make sure when things go bad, you can help survive. But train conductors, truck drivers, the list goes on and on. Well, we're not supermen, we're not superwomen, we're not cartoon characters. We have a limit switch, and if you stay in that saddle, especially running companies, and I guess part of my dogmaticness when it comes to how long you should be able to stay on duty is I worked running companies in Fort Worth my whole career. When I was out in operations, I worked, Station 24 and Station 3, east side of town, very busy, low socioeconomic area of the city, and we ran our butts off. I mean, just period, end of story. So, and I was young at the time. When I went back as a BC, late 40s, at that same house, it was a triple house, a BC, a ladder, and an engine. I'll tell you, it wasn't quite as easy, and I wasn't having to run all the calls. I was running 4 or 5 calls a day as a BC out of that house, compared to my engine company that was running 18, 19, 20 calls. And when ironically, I made assistant chief, went back into a desk job, my son had been on the job at that point several years, and he put in for and wound up getting that station on a different shift. The same month I was leaving, he was coming in, and he grew up in that station, coming to visit me. It was a big deal to him. He wanted to be regular there, but I worried about him because I knew how many calls he was making. Even at his age, I used to stress, man, it's taking a toll. You need to get plenty of rest. When you're young, you burn the candle at both ends. We both know what it's like. But it's, long term, yeah, I think the problem that I have is folks that want to argue with the science. The science is the science, people. There's no way around it. The human body, sleep deprivation, the mental aspect of it, it leads to heart disease. It leads to disease processes. Cancer has been linked to low immune systems. Low immune systems are a direct link of not getting enough rest. It is what it is, guys. There's just no way you can get around it. It frustrates me to have those conversations and people want to be in denial about that.
100%. Well, before we kind of get to that topic, going back to when you were younger, what were you playing and doing as far as exercise and sport back then?
Predominantly, I hung out with your friends. You played sandlot, fake baseball, football, that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, I was in a car accident when I was 13 years old and wrecked my shoulder really bad. Had to have shoulder reconstruction done. So the doctors wouldn't clear me for contact sports. So I tried to play baseball, and the doctor explained to me, that's still a contact sport, son. You can't do that one either. So I wound up playing tennis. That was the one thing they said that I could play. So I played a lot of tennis, and then, got into golf as a young adult and started playing golf. But was not able to play organized sports in school, unfortunately, but just getting out with your buddies, anything with a ball, I was there. Just enjoyed playing, being outdoors.
What about career aspirations? You had parents in the medical field. Were you considering the fire service, or was there something else prior?
I was blessed, James. I tell everybody I was blessed beyond measure. I knew when I was 14 or 15 years old that I wanted to be a firefighter. I was obsessed with it. I did my term theme in high school, my English term theme on the fire service. Read Report from Engine Company 82, and amongst other books for my literature study. But I just knew that's what I wanted to do. I had an older cousin that I was close with, and he was an Arlington firefighter. And I would go hang out at the station on weekends, and the guys would, let me wash the truck and let me mop the floors,
How convenient.
And they'd sneak me on the truck to go buy groceries and tell me lay low if they got a call. But I just loved that feeling of being in the firehouse, and I loved the way those guys, they loved one another. They, I guess I can say grab ass.
You can say what you want.
They grab ass with one another. They had a good time, and it was like, man, these guys are laughing while they're working. They enjoy what they're doing. It's exciting, and I was never one that could. What was not on my career aspiration is sitting in this chair. I can tell you that. I never saw myself as being an office guy, even up 10 years ago, that was never in my radar screen. Being a firefighter paramedic is all I wanted to do. I watched Johnny and Roy religiously. And so I knew at a young age. So I went to EMT school right out of high school to junior college and got hired just as I was graduating from that. And literally, I'm not 19 years old yet, and I'm driving an emergency ambulance in West Fort Worth. The city's ambulance service was privatized, and back then, in fact, it just went fire-based back in July of this year in Fort Worth finally. But I knew, I mean, there was not a doubt in my mind, but candidly, it was tough as hell. I mean, I was scrawny. I weighed 133 pounds, 5'9", 133 pounds. And it was tough to compete against the giants. And back in those days, getting a fire service job was like the lottery ticket. And so I was testing anywhere and everywhere I could test while still working 24/48 on the ambulance. And then finally was blessed to get on Fort Worth in August of 1985. And the rest was history. But I never looked back. I was doing exactly what I wanted to do with my life. And ironically, my pop could not have been more proud of me. He was very happy that I knew what I wanted to do and that I was pursuing it. And he lived long enough to see me make 2 promotions. I was a baby lieutenant when he passed away. But, you know, I say blessed because there's so many people that they go to school because they thought or their parents told them this is what you need to be. And they became that. And they're successful at it, but they're not genuinely happy. And I'm going to use teachers as my example real quick. If you think back when you were in school at whatever level, you had a teacher that you could still close your eyes to this day and you're like, man, I loved being in their class. I love the enthusiasm. I love the impact. But you also could close your eyes and think of that teacher that you're asking yourself, why the hell did you become a teacher? You clearly hate kids. And I think that's an analogy, but I think it's a true one that the ones that teaching is their lifeblood. They're the ones that impact people in such a positive way year after year for their whole career. And then you have those that they're just miserable. They don't want to be in that classroom, but they're too far in, or that's what they went to school for. And they're miscast. I was blessed. I knew what I wanted to do at a young age. I pursued it, and the Lord blessed me to be able to provide me with a very rewarding career, both in Fort Worth and here in Plano. And so I wouldn't go back and do anything different other than I wouldn't have gone to work December 31st of 1993. I'd have called in sick that day because a guy decided that it was a good idea to hit a fire truck head on after a false call was called in. And that really derailed my physical career as far as I've had some major spine surgeries. It was a very horrific accident. And that took me out of the field for several years before I was qualified to go back to physically to operations. But made it back, so, no tears. But other than that, wouldn't trade anything for the people I got to work with and for. Just an amazing, as you know, I mean, we're a unique breed. And I say we because even though I left the fire service coming up on 4 years ago now, I'm going to be a fireman in my heart till to the day they bury me. And I make no apologies for the profession I chose or the defense of the profession.
I couldn't agree more. The way the Marines refer to themselves, like once a Marine, always a Marine, it's the same as us. And I tell people just to prove it, you're driving along with your family, a car rolls over in front of you. Do you keep driving? No, of course you don't, because you're a firefighter, you're a paramedic, you're going to go do your thing. Going back to that wreck for a moment, was that a deliberate driving into the fire engine?
From what I was told by the person's father was what I was told, not directly, but evidently he had told my chief. I was in the hospital that he felt like that it was premeditated. He had been going through a divorce. He had just taken his daughter back to the ex-wife. He had her for the holidays. It was New Year's Eve day, and it was a blue sky day. You've heard that saying. The weather was perfect in Fort Worth, Texas that day. It was a blue sky. It was just a few minutes before the noon hour. We'd already had 4 or 5 runs that day, and this one was supposed to be an auto pedestrian. And at the very last possible second, his car came across the median or the center line and just center punched right into my side, the officer's side of the truck. And it was one of those E1 hurricane pumps and, low slung windshields. If I had not been wearing, we only had lap belts in those days, but if I had not had that lap belt on, I'd have gone out that window. There's no question. My bunker boots went out the window from being in the floor. And the air pack, to this day, I'll say to this day, for many years, the picture of this truck was on every trade magazine. It was in an advertisement for the buckle systems to be able to lock your air bottles in, because my air bottle came out, hit me in the head, bounced off my leg, and went across the cab and took the driver's window out and hung on the windshield wiper blade. And so it was hanging on the outside of the truck. And the name of the truck, ironically, we were allowed to nickname our trucks. Our truck was called the War Wagon. And so here's this demolished truck with an air pack hanging out the window, being held up by the strap of the windshield wiper. And the gentleman that took it was named Glenn Ellman, famous fire photographer in Fort Worth. And you can't pick up a trade journal or a magazine that doesn't have his pictures in it. And he wound up, that picture got sold and was used for years as advertisements for the buckle systems for those air packs. But it was, by all accounts, it appeared to be delivery, yes.
I've had this conversation a few times on here. When I worked in California, I was a tillerman. So I was in the doghouse at the back of the ladder, and you don't have your pack. You've got to have it down in the compartment below. So you climb down, throw your pack on, and go to work. And it made me realize how easy it is to throw a pack on in a few seconds, and how this, clean cabs, stops, grabs, rhetoric that's thrown around is just so ridiculous. Because if you can't throw your pack on while your LT is telling you what they want, or you're doing a quick survey of the scene, then you need to go back to fire academy. But you'd also don't leap off a fire engine and run straight through the front door of a building. But one of the big things, aside from the decon side, was simply that, the number of hazards that come with having the packs inside, whether they fly around in a wreck or whether you get hung up with all the things that are strapped in, versus climbing off with no incumbent, then grabbing it from a compartment. I really feel like, if I got to choose personally, I would much rather grab my pack from outside, because you're so much safer in the cab when it isn't.
Yeah. I had a whole different viewpoint after that, I can assure you.
Yeah, I can imagine.
about anything laying loose in the vehicle. Our Chiefs cars, we had cages, like a cop car, basically, to keep all of our equipment from being able to come forward for that very reason. Yeah, it's things you don't really think about till how many accidents have you made in your life? But when you're in a horrific one yourself, it changes your perspective in a hurry.
100%. Well, one more area just to touch on something you alluded to. As we have this conversation, we talk about the future of the fire service, and therefore, getting that demand back from when you were testing, even from when I was testing, so that you are able to choose the top percentage of a list and really find the cream of the crop when it comes to recruits. I think there's a very responsible conversation in our profession as to the age of a candidate. As we learn in neuroscience now that the brain isn't really fully formed, until about 25. So once we have the demand and the recruitment back to where it needs to be, I feel like getting an 18-year-old running the kind of calls that we see in our profession is irresponsible. And if you look at law enforcement, it's 21 before you can be a cop. What is your perspective on the youngest age that someone can enter this profession?
Well, I guess I probably could have come at it from a little bit different of a lens, because I was young when I got into it. And I think I would. I was a good paramedic. I was a good EMT for a year, and then I became a paramedic. The following year, so. Close to 2 years, a year and a half as an EMT before I made a medic. But I was a damn good paramedic, and I handled myself well. I was young. I got into the fire service at 22, but I think I would have been fine had I gotten in at 18 when I first started testing. So, we're going to mature as we go through our stages of life. But I think it really. I guess, James, from my perspective, is I've seen some young kids come on and they have been dynamite and they just do really well. And then I've seen some that have come on and they have faltered. It's too much to handle, the money, the the whole thing, and sometimes it's the peer group they're hanging with is the problem. But then I've also seen some older folks come on and auger in and do really poorly. And so I think it's more individual based, to be honest with you. So I don't really have a problem with the 18. I do think it's an uphill battle for someone that age, because a lot of times they just don't know how to carry themselves through the interview process and so forth. So candidly, I didn't hire a lot of young people when I was in charge of hiring, but I don't want to paint with a broad brushstroke either and just say that, but statistically, yeah, I don't think there's any argument. You're probably going to get a better person at 21, 22 than you do at 18. But I don't want to I feel like I'd still leave the door open for them. They just got a higher bar to prove to get on.
I think where I'm coming from, and I think the answer is, give yourself the latitude to maybe make exceptions to the rule, but from an ability to process trauma, they're a lot more vulnerable at 18. All of us, we were a lot more vulnerable at 18 than we were 21. So I think that's where this conversation is coming from. At what age can you start exposing a young person to the level and the frequency of trauma that we see in this profession?
Yeah, and definitely, I think being a little older, but again, I feel like it's, we see things that other people, if they saw. I'm going to give you just a brief example of what happened just this past week. Please. There was a news conference just down the street at Central Fire Station / administration, my old office. They were doing a news conference about 24/72. And so all the news media was there. And an elderly gentleman, came and parked his car and calmly got out. From what witnesses are saying, he parked on the admin side. He walked around. He pulled out a weapon. He went into the yard and shot himself in the head. While all the news media is there, while everybody's gathered around, and there was a couple of our civilian ladies that work in the city that were down there for EMS billing meeting, and they witnessed it. And it's difficult, and people can go their whole lives and not see something like that. And when they do, they need some counseling. They got to decompress that. We see that stuff all the time. And so again, if you and I take our shirts off, well, at least I don't have a big S tattooed on my chest. I can guarantee you.
I certainly don't.
and so we're human, and we're going to see things. I can remember through my career, I would hit dark spots, times when you would see, again, mostly kids, but are just horrific events where there's just a big loss of life, senselessness to it. And, I remember after 9/11, man, I went through a depressive state. I'm sure all of us did that were in the profession back then. America, we all mourned, but I think those of us that are in the profession, I just remember busting out crying like 3 or 4 days after it happened. And my wife came over and hugged me, and she said, "I've been waiting for that to happen. I've been waiting for you to let go." And she knew when I would have a bad call, like, a young woman, back when we were young, we first got married, and, you'd see a young woman that had been brutally beaten or raped or some senseless tragedy. And you call home at 2 a.m. to check to see if everything's all right. My wife is pretty intuitive. She realizes he has seen something bad. There's a reason he's calling at 2 a.m., waking me up to make sure I'm okay. And in retrospect, was that the brightest thing for me to do? No, but I'm human. And, like I said, I don't have any trouble crying. If it's a bad event, I'm a human being. And if I will just say this, if we ever get to the point where we're so callous that we say it doesn't impact us, then you need to find a different profession. Because I don't know how you can have empathy and compassion for your fellow human being if you're really in that mindset that you can just compartmentalize and nothing bothers you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, you alluded to the 24/72. Let's go back a little bit. Talk to me about the working environment that you found yourself in at the beginning of your journey in Fort Worth, and then lived experience. What did you see as far as physical, mental, the toll that you experienced when you were actually in operations?
Well, I think The physical toll is pretty obvious. I mean, obviously we stayed, I worked at a house where we worked out as a group, and, so you stay in physical condition. I mean, we lived that. We had minimum standards to stay on the truck physically. And so I would say the physical aspect was a little bit easier to overcome. I think it was more of the mental aspect. But I was one of those folks that I never put my part-time job ahead of my fire job. The fire service for me was never about, I just want the pay, the benefits, and the retirement. Like I told you earlier, I was called to the fire service like a preacher gets called to be a minister. I mean, it was just what I knew I wanted to do. So my part-time job from probably 8 or 10 years after I got into the service, my part-time job became the fire service. I would teach at the academy. I would be put on special committees by the fire chief to do some stuff as I was rising through the ranks. But I learned how to get rest. I was one of those guys that would go home, take a shower, and get in bed and take a power nap for a few hours. So that's how I kind of coped with go if it was a relatively easy shift, which we didn't get a bunch of those, but go play golf, do something. But I find what happens is these folks come on and we're all hustling, we're all trying to make a buck. But I'll be honest with you, fire service didn't pay what it pays today. We didn't have the discretionary income that these folks have today. But I didn't get into that vortex. Folks they get into it, well, I'm painting houses, or I'm moving, or I'm doing landscaping, whatever. And man, they get off work no matter how tired they are, and then they go right into that work environment for 2 days. And then they're right back at the station, and they're not getting any rest. I think the only time I ever got into that where I'm like, okay, I got to do something was when I contracted my own home. I grew up in the trades and had a lot of uncles and stuff that taught me things. And so I built a home in right about the time that accident happened. I built a home out on some land out in the country that I lived in for 22 years. And building that home every day, beating on that place from sun up to sundown, 14, 15 hours a day, and then working at a hot station. It was the longest 4 months of my life. And I mean, it did take a physical toll on me. And where I say that, I literally was bitter toward that home for the first 6 months I lived in it, because I was so pissed because I'd worked so hard that it becomes something that, you don't look at as joyous. It took me a while to start enjoying the place because I was so mad about what I'd gone through to get it. And, I didn't have to push myself that hard. I was young and dumb. If I had it to do over again, I wouldn't do it that way. But anyway, bottom line is you've got to take time to rest. And sometimes, and this is where I'm saying I look at this from both sides. It can't just be the city and the fire service, the chiefs. They can't just be 100% responsible for your health. You as an individual have to take some personal responsibility. We can make a lot of things to improve your safety, but then the troops have to be willing to do their part as well. You need to eat right. You need to get some rest. You need to, again, decompress, do something that's relaxing. Don't hustle all the time. Don't party every night if you're a single guy. Just because the bars are open, you don't have to be in them every night. I think that there has to be that, we owe our troops the best that we can provide them with the science that's available at the time. And we have to keep in mind the science is going to change. It's evolutionary. What we thought was right years ago, we've now found out, that old, you're going to push the fire, you got to take a beating. We're learning some Governor's Island taught us a lot. But, there has to be accountability on both sides. And we have to provide the safest work environment we can while realizing it's an inherently dangerous position. So there's going to be no matter what we do, things are going to happen badly. But then the troops have to meet us halfway. And so personally, I've watched a lot of your podcasts, later start times. That's like a taboo subject. I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't know of either one of my previous department, which in full I've not been there in 10 years, but my boy's still there. I don't hear any drums beating over there for a later start time. And they start at 8, is 0800 is when you have to be there. Here in Plano, it's 0630. And I've not heard anybody beating down the door for a later start time. Personally, I would think a 10 a.m. or like Austin, a noon would be a wonderful time to start. But again, it's framing your mentality to say, the fire service is my job and it pays me well enough that I don't have to work another job. This is my chosen career, and put that first. But when you start peeling back the layers of, well, why do you not want to come in? That usually comes back down to something they're doing on their days off is the reason why they don't want to come in at a later start time. I mean, what's your experience been on the later start time?
So it's interesting because this came across my radar just probably 2 years ago. I think I'll credit Sarah Jenke. I think it was her that really talked about it. And I was like, why do we start so early? It makes no sense. And until you really understand the sleep medicine and the reason why we need this extra day between shifts, then that's not going to have any traction at all. But if I think about, again, I was always in super high op tempo stations. If I'm oncoming shift, I realize this in my career, working 1 day on 2 days off, even though that phrase is poorly worded. I only saw my family 1/3 of the mornings that I had my entire career, because the ongoing shift, I was up and out the house while they were still asleep. The returning shift, when I came off shift, they'd already gone to school and work. And then the third day, I actually get to see them in the morning. So if I'm ongoing, I get to wake up with my family, have breakfast with my kids, take them to school, kiss my wife goodbye, then pack my stuff, go to the station, do the exact same thing I would have done a few hours prior, but instead of breakfast together with the station, it would be lunch. If I'm off-going shift and I got my ass handed to me all night, I can actually maybe get 2 or 3 hours sleep before I can, get up, do pass on, and then go home. So now I'm not becoming one of these statistics that we lose on the way home from a shift, which happens all the time. So to me, that is a win-win. Now, then you add in the 24/72, so you got that extra 24. You can still do those couple of days of your side gig, because that first day you kind of rest, and then day 2 and 3, you can still do it. And kind of carrying on the conversation you had about jobs, one thing I've heard from usually chiefs early on when I had a lot of pushback was, well, if we give them more time off, they'll just work more. Now, what they're thinking is overtime. Well, the whole point of this initiative is to make the overtime go away in the first place. So now the ability to work, apart from occasional overtime, which I don't think anyone has a problem with, is to do something else. If you want extra income, if you want to, save for your kids' college, or you're a water skier and you want to buy a boat, whatever it is, then yeah, you might need to get some extra income. And so there's nothing wrong with having a personal training business, landscaping, construction, whatever it is, as long as you go to bed, as long as you're home with your family every night. So this is the thing, I think, between the two is, if you're taking an extra overtime shift, if you're working on an ambulance or an ER overnight, then you're an idiot. That's when you should be getting rest. But should you be able to work between, 8 and 6 on, day 2 and 3 after a 24, I think, yeah, that's absolutely fine. So just like you said, the responsibility of us for understanding sleep hygiene and responsible work in between is imperative, but also the administration, the chiefs understanding that it's okay for their people to work as long as they're doing it sensibly. So I think this is the problem. If it's a them and us conversation, it never gets anywhere. You meet in the middle, and as you said, both parties are responsible, because we are. Now all of a sudden you're coming together and finding solutions.
What is I guess when I was asking your experiences too, though, what do you see amongst the troops? Because that's what I was saying. It's the troops. I mean, the fire chiefs, to my knowledge, I know I never cared, and I don't think the current chief would care what time they start. They are the ones that are animate that they don't want to go to a later start time. What is your sense out there on the East Coast amongst the firefighters themselves? Do they want a later start time, or are they kind of embedded in that early?
It's a new conversation. A lot of people, when the penny drops, go, why aren't we doing this? This does make so much sense, because if you look at the research, when we arrive on shift, we're already chronically sleep deprived. I lived 70 miles away from my station most of my career, so I'm getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And, the night before a shift, it's not like you're going to bed at 9 and having this deep, peaceful sleep. You're just not. So it makes a lot of sense. But it, just like anything, as you've seen, there are people out there that will literally say the 4896 is better than 2472. We'll unpack the math in that in a moment. But that's complete lunacy. It's the same with this, because they're like, oh, but I've got to hand my kids off. Well, think about it. You can take your kids to the daycare if you have this shift. So I think rather than looking at as, oh, but it doesn't work because I've got everything around the way it is now, having the latitude to be able to go, well, what if we did it that way? I guarantee you a majority of the people will go, you know what, that is better. We do need to give that a try.
Yes. Like I said, I would have been down with it, but I was always the kid that didn't want to wake up for school anyway. So I would have had no trouble with a later start time, but it was just not something that was even talked about or discussed. In fact, for years, firefighters around the state would make fun of Austin because they started at noon. But I got a buddy that's retired out of there, and he's like, it's all what you get used to. He brought up all the same things that you brought up, the positives of it. And it's like, it's not a bad, one of the things he brought up is the lack of traffic that you have to deal with, because you're coming in after rush hour's over and you're leaving after rush hour's over with. And so to me, that would be a perk in itself. But anyway, I'm just going back to the broader discussion of, at the end of the day, we have to be accountable on both sides of the fence. So as leaders, as the people with the purse strings, however you want to look at it, we have to prioritize firefighter safety in every respect that we can. But then the firefighters have to do their part too. And you'll hear, well, we can manage that, but it doesn't get managed. I've talked to several chiefs that have crews that work 4896, and their words to me were and I've talked to several, and when you get behind the scenes at the pub, at the NFA, or at our Chiefs Convention, they're all honest with you. They're like, whatever problems you have today, you're still going to have those problems. They're just going to be exacerbated, quote unquote, from an Arizona chief that's still on that shift. And he's like, contractually, we're never going to get them off that shift. And he said, but you're not going to get rid of any of the problems. Your PTSD is still going to be just as bad. Your divorce rates, your cancer rates, your heart attacks, your mistakes. He went on and on. He goes, it'll just be worse. And so you'll hear the guys that are trying to push for it say, well, it's cost neutral. No, it's not. It's not cost neutral. And so, and again, it's that has been somewhat of a, just a point of contention and angst, is that we need an honest conversation. And if it's really more time off, man, we're down with that. I mean, I don't know any city manager that can argue with the science. Now they can talk about, well, how are we going to finance it? And that's where you start getting into the give and the take, and there's different ways to do it. But at the end of the day, can anybody with a straight face really argue that 56 hours a week is, well, put it another, accountants wouldn't work 56 hours a week. Purchasing agents wouldn't work 56 hours a week. City managers don't work. I mean, we might wind up working 56 hours a week, but it's not the same type of, you know what I'm saying? I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about, we're having to make decisions. We being the fire service, you're making critical decisions that just don't impact you. They either impact the patient you're working on or the rest of your crew. Or if you're a battalion chief, now I've got an entire 6 or 7 companies on a scene that I'm responsible for. And how do you do that in a fatigued state? It doesn't make any sense to me that people are going to try to argue. Again, we don't have S's on our chest. There's no way that you're going to be in a good mental state when you're fatigued. So the whole concept of working 56 hours a week, I know it's the way we've always done it, but that don't make it right. And so understanding more and more about why we don't make as many fires as we did back in my day. And we have better safety equipment. We have smog capturing. We have all these things. And we keep saying, well, it's because of the plastics. James, I'm 63 years old almost. Plastics were around when I was a baby. We didn't just invent plastics yesterday. And so you get to looking at it, and the more you start delving into the science, and in full disclosure, I didn't necessarily get into the science as deep until the 4896 discussion came up. And then in researching and looking to see, okay, how is this? Because intuitively you just hear that and you're like, that doesn't sound like it's going to make you a better product for the citizens or for your own safety. But when you start digging into the science, you realize fatigue is causing cancer. Fatigue is causing heart disease. And those aren't going down. The fires are going down. Running companies are still running companies. We were running companies back in my day. We're still running companies. So that it's not necessarily that, although in ours here in Plano, our call volume has gone up significantly over the last decade. But in your bigger cities, it's always been busy. So what's the common denominator? And then you start looking into the science. And I found you and your podcast doing an internet search and trying to, and I was like, well, holy hell. And you start putting the pieces together and you realize our cancer rates aren't getting better because we're not changing the common denominator, which is we're working too damn many hours. It's not, everybody kept arguing about, well, you get 4 days off, you'll come back better rested. I'm like, guys, if you send me to Hawaii for 2 weeks, I'm going to come back rested. If you send me for 3 weeks, I'm going to come back even more rested. But if you tell me I've got to work 2 solid weeks with no days off or whatever in order to earn the right to go do that, it's not, you can't get there from here. I don't care what anybody says. And I know there's passionate people that are going to argue with me on this, but I just tell them to go BS somebody else. I wasn't born behind this desk. I was born on a fire truck and in an ambulance. And I know what it does to my body when I'm having to work that many hours. And there's a difference between doing it at 22 and doing it at 52. And you got to also look at who's on that truck with you. And a lot of times the gray-haired guy wearing glasses that's cranky, he's 52, and he's the captain or the lieutenant. And he's not handling it, but his mentality is he's got to macho up, and he's got to handle it like the young guys do. But we both know we're not the same. As every decade of life gets tougher. Anyway, like I said, I think we've got to reframe how many hours a week should we be working? And a 42-hour work week is a hell of a lot closer to a 40-hour work week that the rest of America works. And as you know, I've had a private conversation about this. There's studies out there now that are showing in progressive countries that a 32-hour work week is actually the sweet spot. And you're going to maintain at or better productivity than you do working a 5-day work week. So again, I think we have to, the science is the science, and we are living in an era where unfortunately science is not being followed. Let's just leave it at that. I'm not going to get into political debate about a lot of stuff, but you know what I'm talking about. It's like we're going to ignore all this data because it doesn't fit our narrative, and that's not the way to run a railroad.
Well, that's a good segue. It's, as far as not acknowledging the data, you've got a pretty interesting perspective now, 4 decades in the fire service. What have you seen as far as the impact on recruitment and retention over the last few decades, as you know, we've kept doing it, air quotes, the same as we've always done it?
I've noticed really and truly it's been the last decade. I didn't really notice it in my career in Fort Worth. We didn't lose people. They were lifers when they came on, unless they did something stupid and got fired. They didn't leave to go to another department, and we poached, quite frankly, from a lot of departments. And they were lifers. Fast forward, after I became the chief here, a few years after I was the chief, I started having guys coming in, and they were resigning to go be real estate agents. They were resigning to go be, I had one left to go be a police officer. We're still trying to get him some psychological help. But, we had guys that were leaving to go in completely different professions, or in Plano, we have we're Texas Municipal Retirement System, which is a statewide retirement system, and you can leave after 20 years. Now, you're not going to make a whole lot, but you can draw a salary after 20 years of service. We're seeing people punching out at 20 and 25 years instead of 30 and 35, like we always did. So that's the retention side. Definitely seeing a difference, a degradation in being able, and I'm not going to say it's in alarming levels, but it just didn't happen before. If there was one or two a year in a department of 800 people at the time, that was an anomaly. And over here, a department of 400 and something, and it's happening more and more frequently that they're leaving to go some other totally different profession. Then on the recruitment side, definitely a big difference. I think somewhere, it used to be around, I'll go back to Fort Worth, about 1,600, 1,700 people would show up for a written test. And a year or two ago, I think my son told me that they had like 800 or something. It was like half that amount showed up for a test. Now, that's still way more than what they had openings available. But when you slice the number of people that are applying in half, you can start to see a trend line here. If we're a business and this is our sales, we're getting damn nervous right now because things are trending in the wrong direction. And so in order to bring that back, and so I'm going to give you some science here, some hard data. We have a test coming up next week that we're opening up for firefighter EMTs, because we changed in 2016. I went before the commission and got it changed to paramedic firefighter was the bar to take our test, because we were sending 2 people to school a year, and both years in a row, half of them failed out. And I had people retiring out faster, so keeping medics was a commodity. So we switched to a paramedic only model, paramedic firefighter. And through the years, we've been able to fill the slots. So I'm not going to tell you that we can't fill them, but we've seen a rapid decline. So we gave a test today, and we had 58 people show up that were certified paramedic firefighters to take the exam. We won't, obviously, after they process out through the physical and all that, and you start winnowing them down, background, and then going before the review board, that number will get much smaller. So what we saw is that since we're going to be hiring more people now to go to 24/72, we're going to have to open the door back up to firefighter EMTs, which I don't want that to sound like, oh, well, you're getting a second tier. Firefighter EMTs are, wonderful. And it's just a matter of we run the ambulances, so you got to have paramedics, just being pragmatic. But we got a bunch now because that's all we've been hiring since 2016. And we're still going to continue to get those that are going to apply. But where I'm going with this is the chief told me today they closed the sign-up period. We have 400, and I think 58 was the number, but it was well over 400 firefighter EMTs signed up to take our test next week. We've never come close to a number like that before. Word is out. It's been all over our news media down here. It is, you can't look anywhere and not hear or read a story in general media, not just in the fire service circles, that we've gone to 24/72 and that we're now under a contract that the council last Monday night or Tuesday night voted in. And so there's your answer. If you want to talk about recruitment, I don't need to say more. We're going to have a plethora of people to choose from to fill what will probably be about 40 slots this year through attrition, plus the 22 new hires. And we're going to be a hiring factory for a while, because not only are we adding 22 every year to get to 24/72, we've got a fire station that's going to start construction at the end of next year. It'll be our 14th station. And we're going to need 22 people just for that station alone when we open it up, on top of the 22 that we're going to be hiring. So there's 44, plus we have an attrition rate of about 15 a year. So we're going to be hiring a lot of people over the next several years, and we're going to be making a lot of promotions over the next several years. But we're doing that. The chief is doing that in a very smart way. He's going to do it over a 2-year period of time, because as we're transitioning into this, the guys are going to get more and more days off each year of this contract until they get to the 4th year. At the start of the 4th year, they'll actually go to 24/72. but then they'll owe 7 debit days back to the city that year. But next year in 26, they're going to get 6 shifts off. The next year, 27, they're going to get 12 shifts off. Then the third year, they're going to get 18 24-hour shifts off. So twice a month or 6 of the 12 months, they're going to get 2 5-day breaks. And then the other 6 months, they'll get a 5-day break. Well, help put a 24-hour vacation day up against one of those, and you're off 10 days. So you can see where this is going. We're going to have a lot of people that are going to be wanting to come on the department, but we're going to need those promotions in advance because we're going to be having people off. So you're going to still need a captain or a lieutenant, what have you, so, or a driver. So we're going to stage those in. But the chief and his team, they've done a remarkable job of laying all this out, preparing for it. I mean, I think it's going to go relatively smooth. There's always going to be a gotcha that we didn't see. That's just part of life. But I'm excited. I'm excited for the next generation of firefighters. I'm excited for my brothers and sisters that are going to be able to, I always used to tell them, I want you to go home, safe. And that was a mantra in the fire service for many years. Everybody goes home. When I would have talked to my people, I would always tell them, when I say everybody goes home, my definition is you go home 30 years from now with a healthy heart, a healthy set of lungs, a healthy mind. And I joked that go break the retirement system. Live so long that you get way more out of it than you put in. That's my definition of go home. And so this is just the next iteration of bringing, health and wellness to the fire department. And not pat myself on the back. I had a hell of a team around me. But while I was the chief, when I got here, we had no health and wellness program, no 1582 type physical. We got LifeScan in here, and we've now had them for, I guess, about 8 years in a row now. And they have found a plethora of things wrong with our guys at the early stages where it's been curable. We got plasma vents. We didn't have a single exhaust capture in any of our stations. We got it all in our stations. And we got extractors at every station so the bunker gear can be properly washed in a professional machine. We've done all those things while I was the chief. Now, let me back up real quick and say that happened because did I champion it? Absolutely. But if the people in this building didn't buy into it, it wouldn't have happened. If my now city manager, who was the deputy city manager that I worked for at the time, if he didn't drink the Kool-Aid and believe in it, and he didn't make it a priority to take to the city manager, Bruce Glasscock, who hired me and was our longtime city manager / former police chief here in the city before moving into this role, or city manager. If they didn't buy into it, then they wouldn't have been able to have gotten the mayor and the council to buy into it. So the purse strings have to come into this equation. There's no money tree. This stuff has to come from somewhere. And there's only so much pie. So the prioritization of these things happened because the leaders. So yeah, I was the cheerleader for it. But if my city manager would have said, get out of my office and don't bring it up again, I mean, it stops right there. I mean, that's just the real world we live in. And so a lot of the things that have happened because of the culture of our city. We actually have people at the highest levels that truly believe that public safety is paramount to the public. It's important to everybody, and we have an onus on us to make sure that we're giving our troops, fire, police, EMS, the best equipment, the best training, and then all of the things like peer fitness, being able to, we didn't have a peer team. We brought people in from New York and from the IFF, and we formed a peer team. And we've worked hard. And so 2472 to me is just the next step. That's really what it boils down to. It's just it's the next step in following the science and doing the right thing to try to provide the best. And for those out there in the world that will go, well, if you're really trying to limit hours, then put them on a 40-hour work week and put them on 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7. They've never worked on a damn fire truck or an ambulance, or they wouldn't bring that up. That's not how it works. So, the sweet spot is that 24 hours. We're built for that. We can do that. We manage that just fine. It's after that is when you need to have that break, when you do have a bad 24. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but we can tell I'm firefighter safety has always been number one for me, and I don't apologize for it, and I never will.
Well, we were talking before we hit record about, and I've heard this with Pasco and other places where this has been successful. Obviously, there has to be collaboration, union, city, the firefighters themselves, the chiefs. Otherwise, if egos are getting in the way, nothing's going to happen. Talk to me about the initial conversation and the resistance that you got with the 4896 proposal, and then how were you able to convince the membership themselves, but also from a financial point of view, show the city not only the improvement in the health of their firefighters, but the fiscal element as well.
Well, just real quick on the 4896. I mean, I was against it when I was the fire chief. Like I said, it was something that was, it's caught on here in Texas really big, and the more departments that go to it, the more then the pressure is, well, we're going to lose our people over to there, so we've got to go to it now too. And I just said, guys, no, we're not doing it. And I actually did a video for the department years ago when I was still the chief, just shutting that down. We're not going to have that conversation. We're not doing it. Stop. Because 2 days in the saddle at a busy company is just not a good, like I said, the science, we don't have to rehash it. So when I got into this position, and obviously I was still against it. And the guys knew that. And I became public enemy number one, if I'm just being candid about it. I mean, not everybody in the department was ready to beat on me, but a good chunk of them were. And it got really ugly. It got really personal attacks on social media and stuff like that. But the rule one, if you're going to be the fire chief, you better have thick skin. So you can't let that, when I was doing stuff that they all loved and they were ready to make a bronze statue of me, you got to hold that lightly and don't drink that Kool-Aid. And when they were ready to say I was the worst guy ever in the city, you can't let that bother you either. You just have to. My whole focus has always been taking care of them. When I was a bat chief, and I would say, guys, get out, give me a par. They'd get mad at me. We could have got it. Okay, yeah, whatever. Maybe you could have, but then maybe you couldn't have. And I'm not going to kneel down and hand a flag to your wife. So if you want to get mad at me because I'm trying to protect you, get mad at me. And that was my whole point, is it's not that I'm anti-4896 or I don't want the guys to be happy. Nothing could be further than the truth. I want them to be healthy, and it's not a healthy way. And I get some people are doing it out of necessity, whatever. I'm not going to debate if that's really what people believe in their heart. But again, they're not following the science. And so we had to get past that, which that wasn't very hard to do at all, because what I'm going to give the guys a lot of credit for, James, is I wouldn't know everything I know now had they not been bringing up wanting to go to 4896 and beating that drum and turning it into a really big political issue here in our city. They did a media campaign. They're professional. I'll give them that. I mean, they went about it, in a way they were trying to line their ducks up, but they didn't have the science on their side, and all they had is everybody else is doing it. That's not a good argument. And so it was easy to sell our elected officials and my manager on, no, here's the science. But what that led was, while I'm trying to prove about the fatigue, the things that you know innately, because I've lived the job and I already know what it's going to do to you, I had to start getting the science lined up. So when you start doing scholarly work and you're looking for articles, you're looking for podcasts, you find stuff like yours that I tripped onto. The interesting thing was I wound up talking to one of our council members, and she goes, have you seen the podcast with the guy with the funny accent? And, and she goes, this 2472, that's the way to go. So we had council members that were doing their own research, and it all led to, so what I'm going to credit the guys for is, if they hadn't have raised all the hell that they did to start trying to say we want 4896, then a lot of this wouldn't have come to light. You don't know what you don't know. And so when you really start looking at it, because it is new here, it's not something that's prevalent in Texas. And so when you start looking at all the data, the science, but this councilwoman, she brought up the fact that this is going to save us money. she put the two and two together that fast. And she's like, this is going to lower our cancer rates. This is going to lower our workman's comp. This is going to lower. So morally, it's the right thing to do, clearly. But if you need a financial reason, she started putting it together. She's just very, very astute. Her name's Julie Homer. I don't think she would mind me sharing her name. She's a very intelligent woman. She does her homework, and she figured out really quick that this was a good thing. So bringing the guys in and having the conversation, it was not a hard sell at all. I mean, my manager and I, and again, he's not on this call, but I'm telling you, you want to interview somebody that's just not from a fire background, but just a super intelligent man who cares about the employees as well as the citizens. Mark Israelson, best boss in the world. I mean, that's the only reason why I've stayed in the saddle as long as I have, is because I just love working for the guy. He's just a super ethical man. His dad's a retired FBI officer for many, many years. And so he grew up around public safety, but he's got that mindset of taking care of the troops. And so this was a collaborative effort. Yes, we as management, I think what makes this different is we're the ones that reached out to them and said, hey, come talk to us, and we'd like to talk about 24/72. And my boss and I had conversations, and he's like, it may take 10 or 12 years, but it's something I'd like to work toward. And we were talking one day, and I said, well, what if the guys took, a pay cut, or what if they froze wages for X number of years? And he's like, that's a conversation we can have. So the more we were talking about it behind the scenes here, the more we realized that there's a way to get there. And so when we brought them in and we initially talked about it, and we said, we're going to need meet and confer. Again, this is management. This is what makes this so unusual. Normally, the union would be coming to the leadership saying, we'd like to get meet and confer and trying to win the city over. We're telling them we're going to need meet and confer. It just worked out. My legal department, they hired an attorney that I've worked with before when I was in Fort Worth. Best guy that I know that does collective bargaining and so forth and works for the city, but he's pragmatic. He wants to not alienate the firefighters. Just a great guy. And Lowell Denton and his firm. We had this thing put together. I mean, our negotiations, James, took one day. We scheduled it, and it started at 8:30 in the morning, and I think we were done by 2 in the afternoon with a handshake agreement. And then it was a matter of getting the harder part was boiling it down to a legal document that covers everything we had talked about. But even that process, once we got that done, the back and forth and the minor changes and the things that had to happen, the sausage making was not as ugly as what people would think. We got, because again, it was a common goal. Y'all want more time off with your families. Y'all want long-term better health. We want those same things for you. Now, how do we get there? And it can't be that we just print the money, because I can't close a library down. We can't close a rec center down. You can't raise taxes on people. I mean, none of those things are going to be palatable either. So you have to figure out how can we get there. And but again, it starts with having a very ethical leadership from the mayor and the council. My city manager, just like I said, being a rock star, all those things I told you that I was given for firefighter health and wellness. I put that together my first year here as my strategic plan, a 5-year plan. He pushed all the chips over to me in the very first year. He came into my office one evening and said, hey, me and the manager were talking, and this is what you're going to get. And I'm like, and oh, by the way, it was 31 new positions. We added 2 truck companies and a couple of staffers, and amongst all that other stuff. It was a $6 million increase in 1 year. And but they're like, hey, you made your case. And I said, we needed a training center. And they said, you'll be on the next bond election to get a training center built. We've got a world-class training center now, thanks to the citizens. So our community has always valued public safety. I give all of our officers in the police department and the fire department an immense amount of credit, because they understand the citizens are who we work for, and they deliver service at a level that few departments deliver. I mean, the little things, if those guys are buying groceries for the shift and they see a little old lady taking her groceries out, and they'll run out and put them in her car. They're always going that extra mile here to do great things, and they've got that public capital on their side. And so we didn't have a single person in a city of almost 300,000 people. The night this was voted on by the council last week on Tuesday night, not a single person came and spoke out against this. There's always someone that's going to have opposition. No one from the community came out and spoke against this. And if you went back and watched the tape, it's available online with plano.gov. Almost every single council member spoke, and they all spoke about why this was important to do this and why it was the right thing to do. And it was a unanimous vote, 8-0. That just doesn't happen in a lot of communities because egos get in the way. People get their feelings hurt because there was some sharp elbows or some verbal jabs that were thrown. And again, you got to, if I got my feelings hurt every time somebody said something bad about me when I was the fire chief, I'd have to have counseling for that. And you have to grow thick skin, just like firefighters have to be thick skinned in the station. You got to let that stuff go. So I'm very proud of our city. I'm proud of our leadership on both sides, the union president, Brad McCutcheon and his team. We were professional. Even if we weren't in agreement, we were still professional. But we got to a point where we could shake hands and make this deal work. And it's going to be a game changer. And my hope is that we're not the last department in the region that goes to this. I'm hoping that other city managers, but I will tell you that my boss, going back to being a great guy, he's kind of been shunned by some of his brethren, other city managers. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? And to me, it was like, this is the right thing to do. And again, people say, well, why didn't you get there sooner? It's like I said to you before, you don't know what you don't know. It wasn't something that was even being talked about. I think the first time I ever heard of 2472 was 3 or 4 years ago at a Metro Chiefs conference from the Washington, D.C. fire chief, who's a buddy of mine, John Donnelly. And they've been working it, I think he said, for like 20 years. And that's something I had not heard of. And heard a lot about 4896, heard a lot about later start times, but never about 2472. And then, like I said, when I started doing research about the detriment of staying awake for too many hours, it led me to your website. And I started watching your podcast, and you're good about saying episode whatever, and you got your directory. So I was able to start going and looking those up. And if you're willing to come in with an open mind, James, you're going to get to the same conclusion. Now, how you get there financially, all that stuff, that's the sausage making. But if you, with a straight face, can look at the data and come away and say, "Oh, it's a fad or it's BS," you're burying your head in the sand, because the science is the science, my friend. And that's why I reached out to you and told you thank you for educating me. Whether you didn't realize you were doing it at the time, but I was watching your programs and watching your speakers and reading everything I could read. And it became evident that this is the future, and how quickly we can adapt to it, I don't know, but I hope we can get there quickly as a profession. Like I said, I'm going to be leaving government here in 4 months, and I'm leaving on a high note. I'm glad that my guys are going to be safe. But I want this for all of firefighters everywhere, because I think it's the way that we need to be operating. And I think our department will be like a test bed, and there's already, and again, there's plans in place to measure over the years. They've already started laying out the matrix of how they're going to measure and quantify that this was the right decision to make, with what we think will be lower heart rates, heart attacks, lower cancer rates, lower PTSD issues, hopefully less divorces. All that stuff is going to be tracked, and I believe that the answer is clear what it's going to lead to.
Well, I mean, I'm so glad that you found the podcast, as did, you said, one of the council members, and then Logan and Jaime. I mean, all these different people from the department. We're diving into this, and this is the whole point of the Behind the Shield podcast. It is a free library, and this is what drives me crazy when locally there's so much resistance, because they've had access to it a lot longer. The word has been going around. But that aside, what's interesting is you didn't have even the same financial pool that a lot of the country does. As you alluded to, you were still able to hire. You didn't have that mandatory overtime crisis that we're seeing all over the nation, which adds yet another couple of layers of, financial justification. When you have tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in overtime, and you have the same, in lack of retention, you're training all these young people, you put them to school, 2-3 years later, they're gone. This is also a huge downstream budget that you can put into the recruitment of the fourth shift. What is really interesting about the way you've done it, and this is what I'm loving now, is I'm starting to see the innovation. Well, how do you go from a 24/48 to a 24/72 with a Kelly day, without a Kelly day? And so people are figuring it out. And that's certainly not from my podcast. I'm sharing stories like this where people from departments are telling, well, hey, here were the challenges we had. Here's how we got around it. We're considering reciprocity. I mean, all these different nuances that I think are just going to push us even further ahead. But one truth has become very clear. I'd love to kind of get you again just to dig a little deeper into the 5-year plan that you have. I've heard people say, well, we're just going to start off by going to a Kelly day. Now, let's take the average department that is woefully understaffed, mandatory overtime. They're already bleeding people. They're bleeding money. And you're going to take a Kelly day. So now every third day, you're going to give someone a day off. So now that now creates even more holes in the staffing and recruitment. That person's going to end up working their Kelly day, and you're going to pay them time and a half for it. So it fixes nothing. Conversely, though, when a department says we are going to 24/72, that's the declaration. Here's the matrix. It is happening. But we're going to take like 2 years, like Pasco County did, 5 years, like you guys are doing. Now you've got people already starting to line up because they're like, yeah, but they are going to it. They've made a commitment. And that is the difference, especially when you start hiring for that 6-week Kelly, then that 3-week Kelly. So it's not your people working those Kellys, it's the new people covering that. So I think that's a really important distinction. Can you kind of just take a deeper dive into the hiring that you're going to do? Well, firstly, the commitment to the 24/72, knowing the recruitment, but then the hiring that you're going to do to cover these Kelly days and ultimately, create this 24/72 4-platoon system.
And again, going back to the collaborative side, the 5 years that's the money side of it. Guys, we can only afford to hire 22 a year. Everything I'm about to say is not Sam Greif. It's Chief Biggerstaff, Jaime, and another assistant chief down there who's probably one of the most brilliant minds I've ever worked with in my entire life in any profession, named Jeff Moberly. They're the ones that have designed this along with the association to work it out. But how it will work is, because we don't do Kelly days, we do FLSA overtime. And so what this is going to do is they're literally going to hire, and because you already have to be certified firefighter, paramedic, and now soon to be firefighter EMT, if we don't get enough medics. That starts, we're testing this month. That class they will get those processed. They'll start. They're going to be out. We are going to have the people hired by March. We will have everybody hired, and they'll have to do 2 classes just due to the sheer size. There'll be probably about 20 in each class because we've already got legacy openings just through attrition, what we talked about earlier. So we'll get those folks hired, and starting in March of 26, coming up this next spring, is when everybody will start getting, because we got the people hired. Now everybody gets those 6 days off throughout 26, and then it's a rolling 12 months, so it's March to March. So then come March of, and again, the guys came up with this because they're like, we got to have time to hire the people and get them in the field so that we then can have the days off. So as we hire 22 more, we just keep hiring 22 new bodies above and beyond what we needed the previous year. That's what's leading us to allowing them to get more and more days off. So like I said, by the time you get into year 3, and so it's the start of year 3, you got to remember all this is starting immediately. So the guys next year are going to get 6 24-hour days off. So every other month, they're going to get a 5-day vacation, essentially. The next year, they're going to get a 5-day vacation every month of the year, all 12 months of the year. And then in the third year, they're going to get 18 5-day vacations. And then at the very beginning of we're 36 months into this, the clock switches and we go to 4890 or 2472. And then throughout the year, they owe 7 days that will be pre-assigned based on seniority, what your 7 days that you're going to owe. So, and I have no idea how the chief's going to do that yet. As far as I know, he's doing it by seniority. I don't know. Is it going to be you're going to pull a 48, or is it going to be that you'll take a day off, come in and work a day, and then take a day off, and then and do that so that you're not having to pull 48? That would be my preference, but I'm not a micromanager. I'm not going to tell them how to do their business. So I don't really know that component yet, how they'll do that in that 4th year. But then after we've been doing this for 48 months, we're done, starting that the beginning of the 5th year. So it's really just 4 years to get it complete. It'll be a pure 24/72 because we will have hired up enough people at that point to fully create the D shift. And the other factor that this is kind of life-changing for some folks too, because the reality is this is going to create 40 promotions from bat chiefs, 2 bat chiefs a day on duty, to all the captains, all the lieutenants, the drivers. There's going to be a lot of folks that this changes their life financially in a good way. They make rank, and not only does that make a better quality of life for the number of years they got left to work, but then their retirement's going to be based on that. So, I truly think they've come up with a good method. Like I said, how can we get there? And you just keep talking it through. And one of the other things too, because and obviously the contract's public record, it's available online, but we have a 2-year top out. So in Plano, when you hire in with us, when you've been here 24 months, you're already topped out. And so what we said was stretch that to a 5-year top out, which out of the member cities that we compare to, that the association and management have agreed, these are the 10 cities that are going to be in the pool. We're one of the 10, so there's 9 others we compare to. Only one has a 5-year top out. All the rest of them are more than that. And so we're stretching from 2 to 5, and that'll only be for new hires. Anybody that's a legacy that's already here before October 1, they'll still top out in 2 years. Anybody that comes after that will be on a 5-year top out. But that's not out of bounds with the industry, and we're still going to be tied for the best top out of anybody. There's some that are 8 and 9 years. So that poker chip was available. The FLSA savings, because to your point, you won't be having to work 56 hours a week, so you're not going to hit that 53-hour threshold anymore. That savings, and that's how my boss looked at it, is he called it savings. And he started calculating. He's like, I'm going to spend $8-9 million over the next 5 years, no matter what, just because of the way we do raises and so forth. And he's like, so really, I got a delta of about $10 million is what I really have to deal with. And so that, and again, it's to him, that's a priority. He'll find the $10 million, and so will the council, and so will the mayor. That old saying about you'll make time, or you'll make financial availability to what's important to you. It's what's important to you. And, this is such a easy decision, and it's such a legacy in Plano that it's always been about firefighter safety, paramedic safety, and our police officers. It's always been about their safety. We don't ever cut corners. We drive Tahoes in the police department across the board. Everybody drives a Tahoe. Why? They're big, they're beefy, they're comfortable, they're roomy. They hold up in a wreck a lot better than a sedan does. My police chief had come last year at the budget and said, I need to put in rifle shields that are lightweight but can stop. Or ours are old and heavy, and they're just they're basically useless. And he's a big man, and his quote was, "It takes a full-grown man and a boy to carry it." And so it was to the tune of, I want to say, it's like $250,000 to get everybody a rifle shield. And these are the springtime budget meetings where you're gnashing to see what you're going to give this coming October. And my boss looked up and said, Chief, you're saying these will stop bullets? And he's like, yeah. And he goes, well, we're not waiting until next year to buy those. He looked at the budget director and he said, find the money now and get those things ordered. That's how the priorities are in this city, is that we're going to take care of our fire and police. And so, and we don't apologize for it. And we believe that that's why we're such a vibrant community, is because companies want to come to a safe city. And they know that these white collar jobs are not going to relocate here if we don't have a good, safe city to live in, and we don't have a good school district. So it's building blocks. But my whole point here is, it was a collaborative effort, but I don't think in a lot of cities that you can get to the table and do a one-day negotiation, because the egos are too big and there's too much scar tissue about what happened yesterday and not enough concern about what's going to happen tomorrow, and losing sight of what's really important. And I will tell you that I've had to give flags at funerals as the chief. Hands down, the suckiest part of my 6.5 years as the fire chief was dealing with, I had 3 members that were active duty. One was a line of duty. The other 2 were active duty deaths in a span of 13 months. That's brutal. It's brutal on the department. It was brutal on me. And, you know, there's a brotherhood amongst 5 bugles that I guess I didn't really know existed until I became one. But the way my fellow chiefs around the Metroplex reached out to me and like, what do you need? What can we help you with? Let's go get a cup of coffee. Because they know you're grieving too as the chief. Even though I came from the outside and I didn't know these people legacy years like I would my brethren in Fort Worth, it still tears your heart out. It still, you feel this onus to, you're like a dad. You want to protect everybody. And I couldn't take their pain away from them. They were grieving. All I could do is try to make the funeral be as respectful as we possibly could. But it's tough. And when you deal with the human emotion of what we, going back to, again, I get most city managers, deputy city managers aren't going to look at this from the lens I'm looking at it from, because this is not what they've been doing since they were 18 years old. Yeah, I'm passionate about it. I'm never going to apologize, because we're going to spend money to take care of people. You got to balance it. I get that. But it's the right thing to do for all the right reasons. And it's an education. And I'm not faulting everybody out there who's not been educated yet, because a year ago, James, I wasn't educated. No one had talked to me about 2472. When you become educated, now it's a willful decision to neglect and not follow through with a way to get there. And I'm not saying you got to get there quick. I get it. It can take a lot of time. But, you know, my boss was sincere when he looked at the union president and said, we're going to go to this no matter what. It may take me 10 or 12 years to work it in under the current way that we compensate y'all and how we do things, but we're going to go to this. I mean, that was a foregone conclusion in his mind. Once he became educated, this was an easy decision as to what to do next. Now it's just, how do you get there? And that's where the firefighters had to come into the equation and be willing to give to get. And they were gentlemen about it. They've been stand up about it. And when it went to a vote, it passed with 96% of the department saying, let's go to this. And I think they said there was 15 people that voted against it. And my gut tells me it was probably driven by someone who's about to retire in the next year or two. And they're looking at the 3% that we get every year and going, well, I'd rather have that, because my muster out pay would be higher. And would probably be the rationale for that. And again, I'm not casting stones against the people that said no, but it's a democracy. But 96%, that's a mandate. I know that term gets thrown around lightly. That's a mandate when you have 96% saying let's do this. And I'm telling you, ran into them at the 9/11 memorial week before last, and smiles surgeons couldn't cut off. They were happy. They're excited. They're proud because Plano is known as being a leader here in the state and being progressive and doing things before you have to do them or you're forced to do them. And this is just that next level that we've taken it to. So like I said, I just hope other cities can follow suit and don't try to come up with any excuses of it's a bad idea or you shouldn't do it. If you're just saying, look, we don't know how we're going to get there financially, that's a legitimate thing to say. So how can you do it? How many years will it take? What will the other side be willing to give? And work through it. But, you know, as far as trying to say it's a bad thing or we shouldn't be doing it, that to me is just that's a ludicrous argument. That's, again, not following the science.
Yeah, and I've heard that a lot here. But what's beautiful to counter that is what I've seen. I'll give credit, for example, Dixon Phillips at Pasco. I know he's been helping out some of the guys at your department as well, and they spearheaded it in their own department. And what you're seeing is not, well, I've got all the secrets and I want to keep all the best people. You're seeing like, no, we figured out how to change the way that we work, to make it proactive, to attract young recruits again, to fill these vacant overtime spots, to reduce the mental and physical health workman's comp claims, to have longevity in our career. And we want to share it with you. Gainesville, Pasco, Destin, I mean, all these departments that are kind of in it now, I've got to give maximum respect to them. They're out there helping anyone they can. Bending over backs, Boynton Beach, another one. So this is what's so amazing to watch. And I know this has come across your bow of people outside going, well, now you're just going to be poaching our best people. And I want to be very clear about this. The rising tide lifts all ships. You said about 10 years ago is when you started seeing recruitment decline. I would say that's pretty spot on even here. Now, there's a couple of departments locally here that have always had problems because they've never changed many things and they've relied on mandatory overtime for 2 decades now. But arguably, most of the country, it was about a decade ago that we started seeing this decline. So we're not saying, oh, imagine a fire service where people wanted to work for us. We were there. You know, your generation was even more competitive than my generation when I was testing post 9/11. So it's just simply returning to where we were before. And you guys became the first in Texas. I had someone comment saying that you weren't, that there was this other city. You know, they said we were the first in Texas, but then we gave up the 24/72 to have 4-man staffing. And that breaks my heart. You made it worse for your people to have an extra person on the rig rather than saying, well, the extra person on the rig should be a requirement for the service of our citizens, but that shouldn't come at the expense of our men and women and their families. That's insane. So as we sit here now in 2025, you guys became the first one that I know of in Texas, which I think is incredible. But I hope that you become a beacon of light, not a source of envy or competition, but as you've done in this last hour and a half so far, a blueprint for how other people can go. Some are going to be super sought after, well-staffed departments. Others are going to be the majority, which is woefully understaffed. But if we create an environment that causes high performance and high levels of physical and mental health and longevity, the young people that are turning away at the moment are going to circle back and go, you know what, that does sound like an amazing profession. Just the way that you guys are working 56 hours, 80 hours of overtime. One of my Anaheim friends just messaged me the other day. He's on day 5 days straight. Insane, absolutely insane for health, for performance, everything. So when we fix what's broken, we will attract these young people back again, the same as when you were testing, the same as when I was testing, because that is the history of the fire service. But you can't break people and expect us to just keep lining up and showing up again. The internet is a source of information now, and these young people are understanding that this is not the best profession as far as the way that we're worked, and it will come at the expense of their relationships, of their physical health, of potential addictions, et cetera, et cetera. When we fix that, I guarantee you we'll probably see an incredible uptick in recruitment for the entire country. So I hope that departments like yours are seen as a source of intrigue, that people will humble their egos and say, how did you do it? Can you tell us? We'll try and figure out how we can make this apply to ours. And then soon the state of Texas will see the kind of tidal wave that we're seeing here in Florida.
Yeah, and I applaud you guys, like I said, and I do think it will happen, because we are a copycat industry, and I love that. I use that a lot about rising tide raises all ships. But you think about it, there's a tragedy that happens in the fire service, somewhere else in the country, and we don't think anything about putting a contingent of people on an airplane with their dress blues to go attend the service for people we've never met and we don't know. So why the heck would we not share what we know? Let's give them their flowers before they pass away. If we have an opportunity to help people, I mean, that's what it's all about. I've shared the contract with several of my brethren here in the Metroplex that have reached out and wanted to see it and talk about how we're going to get there. And I'll be candid, we want everybody to be on it eventually. There's no question about that. But there is a source of pride about being the leaders and stepping out and saying, once again, this is what we're known for doing, is being the leaders and trying to make things better. And, we did something 2 years ago. And again, it goes back to the city's mentality, but my boss, I keep coming back to him because let's just be, if people don't know how the real world works, if it doesn't get out of the city manager's office, it's not going to get out. That's where the buck stops. And he or she decides what filters out to the council. And granted, you have associations and you have back doors and you have other ways in which you can work it. And again, you're never going to hear anything negative. In full disclosure, I was the PAC president for Local 440 in Fort Worth for several years. And that was my job, was to make sure the message got to the council that was being filtered out of the city manager's office. So, but we did something revolutionary that I had not heard of another department doing. We bought several new fire engines and we leased them, and they're reserves. We just bought straight off the line trucks that just came like the stock. I call it the Chevy Impalas. But we bought Chevy Impalas off the line and said these are going to go into the reserve pool. Because what happens? How many times in your career have you went and got on an old dog that's a reserve for a reason, and then it breaks down, and now you're having to get on another truck? And so we said, let's reverse the paradigm. Let's buy brand spanking new trucks. They won't be the Cadillac models that we spec for normal, but they'll be bulletproof, dependable. And so far, everybody has absolutely loved them. But that's just that flipping that paradigm and saying, instead of pumping money into an old thing that's dying, and there's a reason it got taken out of service to begin with, let's buy something that's dependable. But yeah, it's not the Mercedes-Benz, but it's a dependable Chevy. It's going to get you there, and let that be your reserve apparatus. And so those are the kind of things that we do that we're hoping it catches on, but we take pride in saying we're the first ones to jump out there and do it. And so, yeah, my expectation and my hope is that by the time we have finished implementing 2472 here in Plano, that most of the Metroplex departments have figured out a way, and they're on a glide path to do the same thing and are in the process of doing it, and it becomes a priority. But I'm just going to be, somewhat brusque in my comments, but I will tell you that there's a belief out there amongst some folks that are in leadership positions that it's like, well, it's just as like McDonald's. We'll just find another teenager to take the job. And they're not looking at it like, no, these people are commodities. They're people that are on your worst day is when you're going to meet them. And that's why I always used to tell the guys about, why I was so proud of them for the way they treat the community, every interaction, every time. And most of their interactions just come, someone's changing a tire for someone on the side of the road. They're just doing these nice deeds all the time because they get that majority of our citizenry will never meet them. They may meet them all right, but they're unconscious when they meet them. So every chance you get to impact the public in a positive way, our guys have got a history of doing that. No chief has to browbeat that into them. It's ingrained in them, and they hold each other accountable. I used to say the secret sauce for being a successful chief in Plano, Texas, wasn't my white shirts. It was my station officers, because no one's there at 2 a.m. to see if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing or not. But the feedback was clear to me that they were doing what they were supposed to do. They're the backbone of the department because they hold that high standard amongst themselves and their crews. And again, I think that collaborative mentality of they know why we're here, we know why they're here, we try to support them. When we hit that rough spot in the road over 4896, it was a rough spot in the road. It's like a marriage, but it was never going to be, well, I hate you, or, we're going to work through it. And again, we're the ones that reached out and said, I posted on my Facebook shortly after the council told the association no to 4896, essentially. I posted something to the effect of, I did because they kept telling me to follow the science, is what a lot of the guys were telling me. And I was getting hate mail from departments all over the nation because I was the barrier to 4896. But what I will say is that at the end of the day, going to that table and being able to have that conversation was rooted in the fact that we've always been able to get along with one another, and you don't let one event overshadow the next. Don't try to get even. You're not keeping score. It's about just how we're going to move the ball. And we were able to come together and have that conversation, and there was enough trust that we would get there. And like I said, the association, I applaud them because they came to the table. They were willing to listen. They understood the assignment, and then they went out, and them and the leadership, the fire chief and Jaime and Jeff, the two assistant chiefs, they worked their tails off visiting the stations, answering people's questions, explaining how it would work, how the format would work. Because me and Mark Israelson didn't figure out the formula. We figured out the math. What can you afford to do over the next several years? But then how to implement it and how to make all that stuff work, that's all the folks down the street that have done all that. I mean, I have mementos in my office, but that white Chiefs helmet right there is just that. It's history. I'm not the chief. I don't play one on TV anymore. Like I said, in my heart, I'm always going to be a firefighter, but I don't in any way try to tell them how to run their railroad. The only thing I ever was like no on that I can't support was 4896. And again, it was never, ever about not wanting to give the guys something that they were wanting or what they felt was a better quality of life. It was about their safety and the safety of the people that I serve, because I'm going to be out of service here in a few months, but it sounds corny, but I always took my charge of serving the citizens seriously. I believe in what the young me who raised my right hand and took an oath said all those years ago. And I think it's imperative that we take care of our people, both the public and our employees. And I think this is just another example, like I said, of this right here instead of this. You'll get so much more done when you do this. And city managers, like I said, I'm an albatross. My boss jokes all the time. I'm like the bull in the china closet amongst my peers, even because I come into it from a completely different lens. I didn't come up wearing a shirt and tie like this. I did not come up in an arena like that I'm in today. I have a master's in public administration, but I promise you, I didn't earn that to get into this chair. I knew I was going to be a fire chief someday, and I wanted to be able to speak the lingo of what city managers and how they thought, so that I could get a bigger chunk of pie for the fire department. In full disclosure, it was never about coming into this arena, but it's been very rewarding. I'm glad that I got to play a small part and bringing this to fruition. And I'm going to enjoy sitting on the sidelines as a citizen of Plano and watching these guys get this schedule underway. I know it'll be successful. I know that the chief and the team down there, he's got two assistants, and you said you've talked to Jaime. When I tell you those guys could be starting quarterbacks for any team in the league that quick, they're awesome. He's got a super good group around him. The union's professional. A lot of what we were able to accomplish through the years is because of the association's relationship with council and being able to make sure that when we needed big ticket items, that the why there was never it was never more about, well, we need 5% instead of 3%, and we're willing to give up building a training center to get that. That was never, the guys have always put a value on the equipment, the training. They get it. And they're going to be ambassadors for 2472. I truly believe they will. And like I said, my prayer is that other departments will catch on, and that I'm wanting Texas to be the next Florida, where it just starts, domino effect and throughout our country. Because I'm telling you, our West Coast brothers, and I know you know this, James, because you've been doing this a lot longer than I have, and this is your passion, studying this. But those guys on the West Coast, man, they're getting beat to death out there. I mean, those are busy, busy departments. And my guys were, and people that are proponents of 4896 will use that as the excuse of why we should go to it. Well, they're busier than we are. Well, that's not that's not a reason to do it. I get it. They don't want to drive. We all I lived an hour out of the city, and the whole time I worked in Fort Worth for the most part. So I had that 2-hour windshield time a day. So I get why people, they don't want to have to come to work as many days, but you got to think about what's going to happen when you get there, and what your body's going to go through. And again, I'm preaching to the choir, but you're 20, 24, 25 years. How many years are you into the service now?
Well, I started in 2004, my first job, Hialeah, but then I transitioned out 7 years ago. So, but I mean, I arguably am still in the service, just not getting paid because I'm trying to fight for it now for free.
Oh, okay. So I did not realize that. So you're not active duty anymore.
No, I came in at a crossroads after rehabbing meniscus surgery, getting back to full duty. A lot of organizational toxicity in that particular place, and realized at that moment that I was having more of an impact with the podcast than simply running one call at a time. So kind of took a leap of faith, cashed out my pension, gave myself a salary for 1.5 years, and did this full time. So that was 7 years ago now.
Well, God bless you, because what you're doing is making a difference. Like I said, it's educating people, myself included. And like I said, this is something that, Jaime, from what I understand on the back end, has been a big proponent of this all along, but it wasn't coming to us. No one was coming to us saying we need 2472. It was all about 4896. And so that conversation, though, has led us to where we are today. So that's why I try to always find the bright spots and stuff. And rather than get upset about what went on during that disagreement over 4896 and which path we should go, the silver lining is that kicked off the education for me, for my boss, Mark Israelson, for the council, Mayor Munns. Everybody started learning more because we were sharing that information. And so, yes, it is unusual for us to be the one that reach out and go, hey, why didn't y'all bring this to us? And they were honest. They were like, well, we just assumed that there was no way that financially was feasible. And it's like, well, it is. We got to figure out how to get there, but we can do this. And so I think it's imperative that you have that type of willingness to just come together, shared goal. And if you start with what do we have in common and how can we get there, then it's very doable. But buddy, I could talk to you all day, but I got another appointment that I've got to butt up against. So is there anything that you wanted to ask before we say our goodbyes?
I'm going to put something in very quickly. So the science of the 4896 is a fallacy. Firstly, the question is, why was, as you mentioned, the whole Northeast works 42 hours a week? Why was there never a study comparing that to the 56-hour work week? Secondly, the study that was done, and I'm not poo-pooing the study, but the way it was interpreted, they studied a fire department, Joel Billings this was, that run less than one call a night. So firstly, exactly. It's not actually mirroring most departments. Secondly, the takeaway was that second shift, when you slept all night, you woke up in a fire station, so you didn't have the sleep deprivation of starting at 6:30 in the morning. So what does that really show? That changing the start time is the real science in that in the first place. Secondly, just to add this as well, you're talking about being, in the church and handing the flags. When you don't know any better, then you think that you're doing the right thing. You're given a buy on this. But if you are now aware of the chronic overwork and all the diseases and mental health problems that's causing, and accidents, driving home, all these things, and you still continue to do it the way you do it, and then you have the audacity to speak at the funerals as well, that's where I say shame on you. Once you have this knowledge and you understand that this is a solution that must be addressed, you have to become part of the problem. And that sounds harsh, but it's true. If you just keep going to the funerals and refuse to actually be part of the solution, which sadly has happened, the place where I live, the firefighters that protect me, that's where I'm disgusted at the lack of courage. This requires courage. If you're a city manager, union president, a chief, or simply just someone in the station, and you're pushing against a healthier work week that puts you home with your family more frequently, it's that now you're really just adding fertilizer to the problem. So this is where it's an all call for courage, for humility. If we truly want to make a difference in all the different ways that we lose firefighters, that we lose their family members, we have to put this front and center.
Yeah, what I said earlier is sometimes you just have an aha moment. It's like an epiphany, and as you get educated and you learn about stuff. But another fallacy, in my opinion, has been, I'm not saying that, yes, we have more plastics than we used to have. I get that. But it's not like it just got invented yesterday. And so lightweight construction, all the things that are killing us. But the reality is we have less fires than we used to have. We just don't have them like we did before. Our building codes have gotten better. You don't see 2- and 3-story apartments in Plano that aren't sprinklered. All of our stuff is sprinklered. But yet our heart attacks aren't going down. Our cancer rates aren't going down. And you're thinking, how is it that I'm having less exposure, but yet, and that's why I said it's the aha moment is when you start really reading the studies and you go, well, hell, sleep deprivation causes cancer? Who knew? I mean, obviously doctors and stuff knew, but I didn't realize until I really started doing the research. And again, what drove my decision, why was I so against it? Because I did the job, because I know better. I know what my body was like after I got off a 24-hour shift, and I could handle the 24, but a 48 at my station, and yes, we have some stations, and full disclosure, and most cities do, including even Big Fort Worth, that, after 2 days, you'd have to go wake the guys up and tell them, hey, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here, But they're the exception. The guys that are constantly, and this fallacy of, well, the guys will self-manage, I call BS on that. No, they won't. They will not. They will not say, Station 13, you had a hell of a bad day. I looked at your call volume. You guys were up 3 times after midnight last night. Pack all your stuff. You're going to Station 1. And call Station 1's crew who didn't turn a wheel and tell them you're going to 13's. We both know what that looks like in the real world. And that's where I guess I would get my feathers ruffled, is when the guys would act like, well, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what it's like. It's like, come on. I was not, again, I was born on a fire truck, not in an office. And I didn't work at a slow station. I mean, my record is my record, and anybody can see where I worked. I was Battalion 4 if I was in operations, I was in Battalion 4 in Fort Worth, which that's a very busy battalion, and I was at 2 of the hottest stations you can be at. So it's nonsense to think that, like I said, you have to get past the rhetoric. Don't get your feelings hurt because people disagree with you, but you got to just keep bringing them back. And I feel fairly confident that today, as we said here, the majority of Plano Fire Rescue now hopefully realizes that my entire belief in why, and I used to tell them, I get it, why y'all want it, but there's nothing in it for Mrs. Smith. She's not getting what she's paying for. I get you guys only want to drive in from 2.5 hours away 5 times a month instead of 10 times a month. I understand that, but the people that pay our salary, there's nothing in this from them. They're not going to get a fresh EMT, paramedic, firefighter. They're not going to get the best product, and you're not going to have the best long-term health. And just as I tried to explain to them, is when I was a BC and my job was to say, everybody out, we're going defensive. That was my job, to keep them protected from themselves, because they're hard charging. And that's what we really want. We want firefighters that are going to run into danger. but someone's got to be the designated adult to go, you've had enough, it's time to come out. Or that war horse that tries to put the third bottle on it, you're like, you're in timeout. You're not putting a third bottle on your back. You're done. And you have to be that person that says this is the right thing and take care of your people. And I'm hoping that now that we've got this all behind us, that there's a lot of goodwill in the air. I'm hoping that the folks that were so passionate about 4896, I'm hoping that they look at this as it's an unanswered prayer that we didn't go to it. Because, I'm sure had I not been, if I'd have told my boss, I think this is worth a trial. We did have some council members at the time. We've had an election since then, but we had some council members that were in favor of a trial. And it wouldn't have been a trial. We know what that's like. You don't claw it back. But it'd been like, okay, well, now we're doing what everybody else in the Metroplex is doing. We're on 4896, so everybody's fat and happy, and we're going down, and we're in denial about what it's really doing long term and what it's doing to those folks. And at the end of the day, if everybody's on 4896, your recruitment issue is still going to be your recruitment issue. It's that decline going down. And, so again, I agree with you. I mean, I can lay my head at night with a clear conscience, but again, I want to say that the takeaway that I would have for anybody that says, well, how did you really do it? It starts with collaboration, but it starts with having a magnificent city manager who, I'm not trying to put air in the guy's tires. I'm out of here in 4 months. So it's not like, I'm sucking up. He's just a great man, and he has a great moral compass, a good North Star, and he's always tried to do the right thing for people. And for this, he balances the citizens' needs and the employees' needs with the resources available. And he's got a council and a mayor that buy into that. And that's kind of the secret sauce, I guess, is you have to have some building foundational blocks if you're going to have collaboration. And it starts with, don't let 24/7. I mean, I guess 24/7 can be the kickoff for good relations, but I would hope that's not, that there would be that mentality. And you read so many stories about these contracts and the fighting, the back and the forth, and just the venom and everything that goes, and nobody's winning anything like that. Nobody is winning. And what I would say to my fellow city management people out there in the world is, get your thick skin, and don't get mad about what happened because they went around you on a council issue a year ago or whatever. Get past that. This is about the right thing for the right reason and taking care of people. So, that's my parting message is, we owe it to our citizens, a fresh firefighter, a fresh paramedic. When you get on an airplane, you have an expectation that pilot is going to be awake for the flight and that they're dialed in. I want, as a taxpayer, I want that fresh firefighter coming to me on their best. And if I'm that firefighter, I want to know that my employer has my back and they're going to take care of me. And, when I used to interview folks in their final interview, I would literally tell them, we're both here for the same reason, but your job is to go protect the citizens' asses. My job is to protect your ass. That's what my job is as a fire chief, is to keep my people trained, equipped, well-fed, so to speak. In every respect, I got to take care of them. I'm not going to go kick a door as the fire chief. That's just not going to happen. They are. And so my job is to protect them, and then they can go take care of the public. And this is just the next level of that. It's just trying to support and take care of them. But I'm just proud I work for an organization that understands that collaboration is the way you're going to make things happen, and that we were able to come to a table. But I will tell you, even I was shocked that we got done in one day of negotiation. I never expected it to go that fast. I figured we'd get there, but it would be a month or two of several meetings back and forth. I never dreamed we'd wrap it up in one day. But Brad, the union president, he didn't let any past issues cloud the goal. we didn't let anything cloud the goal. We just, let's come together and let's get this done, guys. And so, anyway, bless you, brother. Thank you for letting me come on the podcast, inviting me on. It's been a pleasure. And we'll have to do a check back and see how things are going in a year or so. But anyway, I'll be following you from afar. But you take care, my friend.